second big geneticist we're going to think about this week is Morgan. Thomas Hunt Morgan is following almost 100 years behind Mendel, but thinking about Mendel's work in a new model organism. So he's going to add two new pieces here. He's thinking about inheritance in fruit flies, of all things. But fruit flies are wonderful model organisms. They reproduce really quickly, and they have a lot of different traits we can study. So he's going to look at this in a different model, see what happens in fruit flies. And in addition, by the time Morgan's working, we know about chromosomes. And people are starting to think, well, all of these genetic factors that Mendel was discussing, the way you're going to pass on one to your offspring, and every person or individual gets two, one from mom and one from dad, that's looking a lot like chromosomes. So once the world can see chromosomes under a microscope, we get what's called the chromosome theory of inheritance. It says, hey, these things Mendel was talking about, those are genes, and genes are packaged on chromosomes. It's chromosomes that get divvied up as you go to reproduce, and it's chromosomes that you inherit from your parents that make that magical combination of alleles that makes you unique. So Morgan can think about chromosomes. He's got a new model, fruit flies. He wants to do some interesting experiments. So he needs to find some diverse trait to study. He has his students look at thousands and thousands of flies under the microscope, and they finally find one that looks a little different. They find a white-eyed male. And since fruit flies have a short lifespan, he knows he better breed that fly quickly. So he breeds it to a red-eyed female, and all of the offspring of that cross have red eyes. So what would Mendel say? Mendel would say red eyes are dominant. You haven't learned anything new yet. Mendel would also have then gone on for an F2 generation, which is what Morgan decides to do. He takes these red-eyed hybrids, the F1 hybrids, and crosses them to each other. When he does this, he gets a 3-to-1 ratio of red-eyed flies to white-eyed flies. So that, too, is exactly what Mendel would have predicted. But there's one unusual glitch. All the white-eyed flies, and we're talking about hundreds of flies here, all of the white-eyed flies in his F2 generation are male. So Morgan's got to think about that and think, oh, how can I explain? What kind of hypothesis can I come up with to explain why all the males have white eyes? So let me show you what that might look like on a Punnett square. Morgan is hypothesizing that maybe he can explain his results, this unusual distribution of white-eyed males in his F2 generation, if that color gene for eye color is on the X chromosome. So here's what that might look like. I'm thinking about the genotypes of my parents. I'm going to show that female fly being XX, just like a female human would be, and I'm going to indicate that on both her X chromosomes, she's got the red allele, and I'll show that with a capital R, since we think red is dominant. Here's the male white-eyed fly. He's XY, just like a human male would be, and he's carrying the recessive white allele on his X chromosome. So if these two reproduce, and I'm going to build a Punnett square, mom's eggs here are going to have this X chromosome or this one, so I'm going to show that, both of which are carrying that red allele. Dad's sperm will have either that X chromosome or that Y chromosome. So let's think about what the offspring would look like in this cross. If this sperm fertilizes this egg, my offspring here is a female. She's XX, and the X that she got from mom has the red, you see that, the red allele on it. The X she got from dad has the white allele. Since red is dominant, this is a red-eyed female. If this egg gets fertilized by this sperm, we're going to get mom's X again. It's got that red allele on it. Dad's Y. This is an XY fly. It's male, and it's got the red allele. It's a red-eyed male. If we keep going, we'll say, aha, what if it was this egg and this sperm? Again, there's that X from mom. It's got the red allele on it. There's that X from dad. It's got the white allele on it. This is a female fly. She's heterozygous, but she has red eyes. And likewise, my last combination here, X from mom with the red-eyed allele on it. a Y from dad. This too is a red-eyed male. So all of the F1 generation end up with red eyes, exactly as Morgan would have observed. His F2 generation takes one of these heterozygous female flies and crosses it with one of these red-eyed males. So you try that Punnett square. See if you get this unusual 3-to-1 ratio that Morgan observed. I think you will. So Morgan observes this unusual ratio. He uses a Punnett square to help him hypothesize what might be going on and gives us this idea of sex-linked genes. It's worth a Nobel Prize. We still use it today. It explains a lot of observations. For example, you might know that males are more likely in humans to be colorblind than females. It's because that's a sex-linked trait. It's on the X chromosome. And we'll try predicting inheritance patterns there as well in class. The second big thing that Morgan gives the world, besides sex-linked genes, is the idea of gene linkage. He too does some work with dihybrids. He's looking at flies and following 2 genes, one for wing shape and one for body color. And when he crosses them, he notices that they do sort independently, like Mendel would have predicted, but he does not get the ratio his Punnett square suggests he should. Instead, he sees that most flies look like one parent or the other, which is quite odd. And again, he has to hypothesize and think, what could be going on there? What he comes up with is the idea that if 2 genes are packaged on the same chromosome, close together, they're going to tend to be inherited together. So he calls this gene linkage, and it alters what we see in a Mendelian cross. So we'll keep those ideas in mind today as we expand our understanding of genetics this week. We want a firm foundation in Mendel and Morgan's work, and then we'll look at some exceptions to those principles as well as we explore and predict patterns of inheritance.